Greetings to you, music lovers, thrill seekers, conversationalists all across the fruited plain. Happy to have you here. Rush Limbaugh at 800-282-2882 and the email address, hillrushbaugh at eibnet.com. Folks, a couple other things I hope to be able to get to today. They are both involved. They are both, one of the things I do on this program, one of the things I've always claimed is to make the complex understandable. And there are a couple of stories that are, if not complex, incredibly detailed. And in both instances, I am going to have to send you to websites for you to be able to get the full impact of both stories. At the same time, I want to be able to convey enough to you in an understandable way. I mean, I'll give you an example. These things print out to 7 and 11 pages each. Now, if I were to just start to read either of these, the 6-page story, the 11-page story, I'd lose you at some point. No matter how good I am at interpretive reading, I'd lose you. You get bored. Listening to what's written is a tough thing, unless you know going in that's what you're doing, like an audio book. So the challenge is to come up with a way to synthesize 11 pages or 6 pages in a couple or 3 minutes and give you the essence of it. And it's going to be really hard to do. One of them involves some truly outrageous things that have gone on in the state of Wisconsin that have happened at the same time as and as part of the effort to destroy Scott Walker. A similar effort, almost identical effort, was made to destroy anybody and everybody who supported him and voted for him or donated money to him. And this effort was conducted by law enforcement. Think of it this way. What do you think the greatest fear of the innocent is if law enforcement comes calling? Have you ever thought about this? Maybe some of you have experienced it. You are totally innocent. Nevertheless, you are being pursued. What is your greatest fear? Your greatest fear is the system is going to totally fail you, and that there is nobody to stop an out-of-control cop, nobody to stop an out-of-control prosecutor, nobody to stop a corrupt judge. And that you're going to be had no matter the fact that you are terribly innocent. That is a fear a lot of people have, and it was routinely occurring in the state of Wisconsin during the recall efforts of Scott Walker and during the general elections and campaigns of Scott Walker. Now, everybody knows what he went through. Everybody knows what his family went through. What nobody outside the state of Wisconsin knows until now, because National Review has uncovered it in great detail, a story by David French. Nobody knew what just average, ordinary, nameless, faceless people who happened to just donate to him or vote for him went through as well. Midnight raids on their homes, police with battering rams breaking down their front doors at midnight, at 1 or 2 in the morning. Never explained why law enforcement was after them. They were forbidden to tell anybody what was going on. The neighborhood saw it all happen. The neighborhood, people in the neighborhood, what in the world did that family do? My God, they got scared to death. The cops didn't have to explain anything. Whatever the prosecutor wanted, and his name is one I hope you will never forget, as well as the judge involved in this. I hope neither of these names do you ever forget, because they are the essence of liberal Democrat corruption run amok with no limits and no stops whatsoever. It is frighteningly outrageous. It's the kind of stuff that Hollywood makes movies about, that when you watch, you might fear it, but you would never, ever dream of it really happening. That's why it's in a movie. So I want to try to explain in a little bit more detail what this story is about, but ultimately you're going to have to read it at National Review. So those are the two in-depth things. Been sitting on the Wisconsin Scott Walker story. I got it Sunday night. They sent me a pre-publication copy, a PDF file. And I started reading it, and I said, there is no way that I'm going to be ready to do this justice by Monday, which was yesterday. So I spent a little bit more time on it. So hopefully I'll get to it today with just enough of a summary to intrigue you enough to make you go read it. You've got to read this. You have to. It's a National Review, and it's by David French. Let me give you the actual title of the story: John Doe's Tyranny. Wisconsin conservatives have been subjected to secretive, baseless investigation. But that subhead, that doesn't even come close to telling the reader what he's about to discover. It's about the John Doe laws in Wisconsin, which we have discussed on occasion on this program. John Doe means the state can literally investigate anybody without telling them why. And they can deny them lawyers. It's incredible. They can literally set out to destroy, and the only thing standing in the way of it is the honor system. If you have a corrupt prosecutor, which this story has, and if you have a corrupt judge, which this story has, and if you have a police department that is also corrupt, it's happened in Milwaukee mostly, then you can pull this off. There's even a quote from a couple police officers who were forced to participate in these midnight raids on innocent people who had not done a thing other than support Scott Walker. That's all they had done. And cop car after cop car, cop after cop, SWAT teams, you name it, show up with battering rams to break into these people's homes. They're kicked out of their homes at midnight at 1 o'clock in the morning, not allowed to take anything. They're not told why. They're not allowed to explain to anybody that this has happened beside the neighborhood which could see it. Years after the fact, mothers are reporting their young kids that were at home when this happened still traumatized. People are reporting today that they get scared and traumatized and panicked when they see a uniformed police officer just walking a beat. They hightail it away. It is the fear that I think a lot of innocent people experience when law enforcement is pursuing them. I know, I've been there. And I know a number of things. Law enforcement's never doubted, other than the civil rights community. The media doesn't doubt them. Law enforcement can leak anything they want about anybody, and the media writes it, and that it becomes fact. Because and even average, ordinary Americans, why would the cops lie? They take it on faith. Why would a prosecutor lie? Why would a prosecutor say somebody's guilty if they're not? They don't have time to waste on this. There are too many guilty people to go get. They will waste time on the innocent. The innocent in Wisconsin were guilty because they were conservative. The left in Wisconsin was losing everything. They were losing their union domination and control. Scott Walker was decimating all the systems they had put in place, and they literally lashed out in panic, anger, and you name it, to punish people who had voted for Walker, who had raised money for him, who they thought had voted for him. It was the kind of thing that Vladimir Putin does and we all laugh about, because that's what we expect in a tyrannical dictatorship like the Soviet Union or Russia. And we find out that it can happen here and has happened here, and there was no mechanism to stop it. Prosecutor's name is Chisholm, John Chisholm. And I hope his name is never forgotten. He has tarnished the reputation of prosecutors all over this country. He belongs right up there with Mike Nifong. In fact, Mike Nifong is a piker compared to what happened in this case. Nifong is an amateur compared to what happened here in Wisconsin. The one puzzling thing about this to me, there's one puzzling thing about it, is Scott Walker doesn't talk about it. Now, I didn't until I read the National Review piece. You know, I knew the John Doe laws, and I knew they'd been abused, and I'd heard this or that, but I did not know until Sunday night just how outrageous the application of the John Doe laws. This is a term that has been developed to describe what happened here. Lawfare, as in warfare, except this warfare conducted by law enforcement. Lawfare. And Walker hasn't talked about it. I mean, everybody knows what he went through. Everybody knows the attacks on him. What nobody outside Wisconsin knows, or very few, they will now, is the same stuff was done to hundreds of people that supported him. One more little piece of information about these Wisconsin raids. Everybody, and by the way, they were all innocent. Nobody was guilty of anything. They hadn't done anything. The John Doe law allowed for anonymous prosecution. Law enforcement was simply allowed to target anybody they thought might be guilty of a crime under the terms of this law, and they had to tell nobody, including the accused. This violated the U.S. Constitution in so many ways, and one of the things it did, just think of a battering ram breaking down your house. You live in suburbia, a battering ram breaking down your house at 1 a.m., and cops, jackbooted or otherwise, come and steal every telephone and every computer, and you never get them back. And they don't tell you why. You're left to assume it. I mean, that's just one of the things that happened. And it was all done by a bunch of aggrieved loser at the ballot box, liberal Democrats, who thought the state was forever their personal fiefdom. And then Walker had to go and beat them 3 times, and they just lost it. And in the process, became exactly who they are. The one plus in this, if there is a plus, is that the left in these incidents in Wisconsin, they threw down all the camouflage. They got rid of every mask. They hid behind nothing. Exactly who they are, if left unchecked and unopposed, was made obvious. And greetings and welcome back, my friends. You are tuned to the nation's leading radio talk show, the most talked about radio talk show host in the country, and most listened to show here at the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. Wow. A sheer delight to have you here. The telephone number, 800-282-2882. The email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. Okay, a blue state plus a big city corrupt district attorney and a popular Republican governor equals a police state reminiscent of the 1930s in Germany. And I am not exaggerating an iota. This is the Wisconsin story to which I alluded earlier in today's broadcast. If you compare this to Watergate, I mean, Watergate is literally romper room compared to this. This is the police batter ramming their way into homes on direct orders of a Democrat district attorney, fishing for information to use against a political enemy, and then threatening homeowners who had all of their civil rights violated, threatening them to shut up or else. The same state, Wisconsin, where union thugs trashed the state capitol in hopes of intimidating the governor into letting their money laundering operation remain in place. I don't say this with any jocularity or casualness at all. This is the kind of thing that should land some people in jail. This is a legitimate comparison to the 1930s in Germany. It would stick. This is a first cousin to what Barack Obama did with the IRS when he went after conservative groups. And it all starts because this prosecutor, this DA, happens to be married to a woman who was a school teacher who get really, really mad at the changes to her own union benefits under Scott Walker. That is literally the little germ that ignites this entire episode. A ticked-off union activist teacher married to a corrupt DA, and they then found a corrupt judge and enough corrupt police officers to facilitate every action they took, which was entirely political. There was no criminality. The people targeted here had not engaged in one iota of criminal activity. All they did was vote Republican. All they did was donate to Republican and our conservative causes. It would begin with a knock on the door after midnight. An armed police force, a SWAT unit, could storm your house, literally use a battering ram to enter your front door if you didn't answer within seconds. Most people in bed when this happened. Again, these are just Ward and Cleaver families, Ward and Jude Cleaver families. These are not criminals, nothing to do with any criminal activity whatsoever, unless you consider voting Republican to be criminal. You didn't answer, they used the battering ram to crash into your house, scaring your kids, maybe for the rest of their lives in some cases. They would then storm in and steal every computer and cell phone they could find. They would not tell you why they were there. They would tell you didn't have a right to know, and they told you that you better shut up about what is going on and what was happening. If you breathed a word to anybody, even in the neighborhood, who had witnessed it, you would be in even further difficulty. And all of this was simply based on the political advocacy that the residents, the adult residents of these homes had engaged in. All of this is the John Doe investigations that began into Scott Walker and conservative groups in Wisconsin. And they've been ongoing now for years. Scott Walker's been really strangely quiet about this. We all know what happened to him, and he's out detailing what happened to him and his family. What we didn't know was the same thing was happening to scores of his supporters and donors, all under the auspices of the so-called John Doe law, the John Doe investigation. The opponents of Scott Walker turned campaign finance law into weapons. David French at National Review has talked to the families targeted in these raids for the first time, and their stories are harrowing. As I say, this is going to print out to 11 pages if you read it online. Shouting officers at the front door in late-night, early morning raids, one case with a battering ram, armed police rifling through and carting off their belongings, down to and including a daughter's computer. The targets were told not even to tell their lawyers. They were told not to tell their friends. They were told not to say a word to their neighbors. Now, if you happen to live next door to a house where such a storming took place, I mean, you'd wonder why. My God, what'd that family do? You would ask. That family was forbidden from telling you. They were not permitted to discuss what happened. They were not permitted to even go get lawyers. This was not the right to remain silent. This was an order to remain silent. And they couldn't even profess their innocence. The demand to stay silent required that they assume a public role of guilt. The investigators were fishing for campaign finance violations, supposedly, which is nothing more than a First Amendment right. Campaign donations are the equivalent of free speech. Numerous courts, including the Supreme Court, have so found. So for exercising their First Amendment rights, they were denied them. The investigations have been going on so long that there's a John Doe 1 and a John Doe 2. As Scott Walker's first campaign for governor got underway in 2010, the Milwaukee District Attorney, John Chisholm, Chisholm, opened the initial John Doe investigation under a proviso of the law that allows officials to keep their targets secret and to compel the targets to shut up. John Chisholm, the DA, a partisan Democrat. His wife was a shop steward for a teachers' union, and she was miffed. Scott Walker was elected and began to implement his reforms of corrupt union activities in Wisconsin, and his wife, Chisholm's wife, literally had a cow. Went berserk. So Chisholm investigated everything possible related to Walker for 2 years and didn't ever lay a glove on him. Everybody knows that's followed this. They threw the kitchen sink at Walker and nothing stuck. So in the run-up to Walker's re-election campaign, the first thing they tried was a recall election. And they fired everything at him then, and they were going after his supporters then. And he won the recall election. Then he ran for legitimate re-election. And that's when they went and got a judge to join this corrupt effort. John Doe entered the next phase of harassment of conservative groups. Investigators swept up personal emails. They issued wide-ranging subpoenas, including information on donors. The Wisconsin Club for Growth describes in court filings how its own activities were hindered as people began refusing meetings. Donors got nervous, and one of its key officials, Eric O'Keefe, was not allowed to explain the nature of the investigation. They literally were trying to scare and intimidate conservatives, conservative donors, conservative voters as much as they could. They wanted to just frighten them and intimidate them into abject fear and silence. O'Keefe has been courageous in resisting the investigations, said that the process is the punishment. The punishment for voting for Walker, the punishment for being Republican, the process, the investigation was the punishment. The offense was backing the wrong side in this political race in Wisconsin. Armed agents of the state operating with the force of law behind them to be used essentially as a political bomb. The John Doe investigation has bogged down now under the weight of its own corruption and unfairness, and there have been a lot of court challenges successfully lodged against it. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court could soon rule to halt the investigations, and they're still ongoing. All of this is still underway in one form or another. The U.S. Supreme Court set to decide whether it'll consider a federal lawsuit brought by Eric O'Keefe and the Wisconsin Club for Growth. Wisconsin legislators are considering scaling back the law that enables the John Doe investigations to prevent future abuses of this. Well, I got to do something, because I think this is every innocent person's fear when they contemplate running up against law enforcement. They know they don't have any power, and if they run into people that are out to get them just because they want to get them, they know they can be had. You have it all here. You have a corrupt Democrat prosecutor, an angry wife of the prosecutor, a shop steward union activist and screw teacher, and then a judge. And the judge has been successfully called out by a number of other legal authorities. She's been humiliated for her role in this, but she doesn't feel the humiliation because she's not capable of it. But to casual observers, what's happened to her in being called out is humiliation. Chisholm is the name that you need to remember, and I'm going to find the name of the judge in this case as well. But every sordid detail and the drama that is associated with it can be found at National Review. National Review Online. David French is the article author, and he's dug deep. And the details come from these families who now are speaking up. And they're doing so in great detail. Take a brief time out. We'll come back and continue in mere moments. El Rushbo and the EIB Network after this. Don't go away. And we're back. Rush Limbaugh to Cutting Edge. Great to have you here. The judge, without whom this case could not have happened, is Barbara Kluka, K-L-U-K-A. And I remember she was, I'll tell you what she did. She came along in the second John Doe investigation, and she approved every petition, every subpoena, every search warrant in the whole case in less than 1 day's work. She enabled law enforcement to raid these innocent citizens' homes. She's since recused herself from this, but not before she enabled all of this to happen in the second phase of the John Doe 2 case here. In the second John Doe case, the DA, John Chisholm, had no real evidence of wrongdoing by anybody. It didn't stop him. Conservative groups were active in issue advocacy, which is protected by the First Amendment. It didn't violate any campaign finance laws. Issue advocacy is politics 101. These people were targeted because they're conservatives and liberals. This, as I say, what happened here, and not only the treatment Scott Walker got, but everybody else, this is liberalism run amok without any checks, without any opposition, without anybody pushing back. And in its own way, California is the same example. Despite the fact that there were no violations of the law in any way, the DA Chisholm convinced prosecutors in 4 other counties to launch their own John Doe investigations, with the judge, Barbara Kluka, overseeing all of them. So, empowered by a rubber-stamped judge, partisan investigators ran amok. They subpoenaed, they obtained, without the target's knowledge, massive amounts of electronic data, including all of their personal emails and other electronic messages from outside email vendors and communications companies. And the investigations exploded into the open with a coordinated series of raids on October 3rd of 2013. These were home invasions, including the ones that I have detailed previously in this half hour. You really have to read the whole thing. As I say, I could devote much of the show to reading the whole article, but I'd lose you. No matter how good of interpretive reading I would engage in, I'd still lose you. This is something that's so detailed. you'll read a paragraph 2 or 3 times just to absorb it.